For this episode, I have Patrick Regan, who is the CEO and founder of Kintsugi Hope. Patrick, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're a busy man. I know lots of people want to speak to you, that you carry such a heart of God, and you're such an encourager to those who struggling with mental health. Thank you so much for being willing to be on here with me. So Patrick, how are you doing? What's life looking like for you at the moment?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. I don't know. I'm probably like a lot of people. Like there's times I think, okay, I've got my head around this now. I'm doing okay. And then there's other times I think, oh my goodness, this is too overwhelming. I personally, I'm finding juggling homeschooling and running a charity, which is meant to be about well-being, really difficult. And a couple of our kids got additional needs, and I need one-on-one a lot of the time, and so that's challenging. And I think that it's just really hard, isn't it? It's really hard to know. I think a lot of people just struggling with guilt at this time. Am I doing enough? And the shoulds, the must, the oughts. I should be better. I ought to be coping. And then I think social media sometimes isn't our friend, because for some people this period of time they're loving it. They're relaxing. They're getting to spend more time with the kids. Others of people are really struggling, particularly people with mental health challenges like myself. And I think sometimes I look at social media and go, oh my goodness, I'm not writing a book. I'm not learning a language. I'm literally getting into bed totally exhausted and shattered. And I think that's what's happening with me. So I feel a little bit of a hypocrite. I'm like running a wellbeing charity and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm absolutely exhausted. But I think that's life, and I've been saying to people all week, you got to accept that this is going to be a challenging time. Acceptance and resignation are two very different things. Acceptance isn't saying I quit. It's just saying, actually, it's okay not to be okay. And I think it's good to say that to people at this time.
I think that's so good. There's something really, authentic about just being honest about where we are. I remember a few years ago at church when someone came up to me and said, "Oh, Matt, how you doing?" And in that moment, I decided to be honest and say, "Do you know what? Actually, I'm really struggling today." And there was this really kind of interesting conversation that came out of that. But I think what you do is amazing, because you help to encourage people so that people know they have the kind of permission to be honest and to be real with each other as church and support. As a dad of you said about children with additional needs, I'm also a dad with a child with additional needs, and they've had kind of history of mental health issues and things. So Patrick, what are the kind of things that you're doing to kind of invest in yourself at this time?
Yeah, do you know what? Up until a couple of days ago, it was going quite well. On the day of lockdown, the day before lockdown, I didn't run down to Decathlon. I got down to Decathlon, the bike shop, bought myself a really cheap bike, because I thought I'm going to need to get out. Last couple of days, my knee, which a lot of people know I've had issues with, has started to play up. So now I can't do that as well. So I'm hoping it's going to settle down. But I've been trying to cycle each day, trying to walk each day. Also trying to do the little things actually that really help me is I've been listening to really old hymns on my iTunes. And the reason I did that is I wanted to listen to something that was written years and years ago at times of struggle, of slavery, in the war. And it's almost like connecting my story to the story of the saints that have been before us and all the stuff they went through. And suddenly for me, listening to songs like When I Survey the Wondrous Cross and Great Is Their Faithfulness as well, my soul, has been actually really therapeutic and really sort of locking me in to the bigger story of God throughout the ages. The other thing I think is really important to do during these times is, I think it's really hard to pray sometimes and really hard to read the Bible. So getting some sort of regular Bible notes or the 24/7 guys got this brilliant app, and doing that, because otherwise you're like, you pick up the Bible and you're like, I don't know where to start. So trying to build in those disciplines into your daily routine as well is really important. But I'd be lying to say it's easy. I've got 4 kids, 2 dogs, 1 cat, and some very neglected fish. So some days it works out better than others. But yeah, I'm trying to do that. And trying not to be too hard on myself when I don't achieve everything I want to achieve at the end of the day.
How would you encourage people then at this time who are, as we know, the majority of people are struggling in some kind of aspect? Have you got kind of any tips or words of encouragement just to be able to continue to self-invest and not neglect ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that classic thing, isn't it? Self-compassion and self-indulgence are two very different things. I think we get them confused. Self-indulgence isn't self-compassion. So, the extra glass of wine at the end of the day because you're exhausted and you just want to take the edge off, or the really unhealthy diet and all that sort of stuff. People do that now and again, and that's fine. But actually, when that becomes a lifestyle and a habit, that's when it becomes dangerous. And so I think self-compassion is talking to yourself the way that you would talk to your best friend. And I think that is the challenge. I think it's the inner clutter that goes on, and the inner conversation in our head that's telling us that we're a failure, that we're not doing it well enough. I think if we could silence that voice, that would be really important. I'm just reading a book at the moment, it's brilliant, called Emotional Agility, which is talking about, when a thought comes, is we've got to think, who's in charge of that thought? Is it the thought or is it the thinker? And that sometimes there can be a pause between responding to that thought, which is often negative. And it's saying, why don't you see yourself as the chessboard with lots of options rather than a chess piece, which you just suddenly move in one direction. And I think I'm trying to do that, trying to look at the bigger picture, trying to take the step back. All the things you read on websites are great, lack of, try not to drink too much coffee, do exercise, be mindful in the midst of chaos. They're all good stuff. But I think that's that internal chapter, that internal challenge that most of us have. And if we can learn to control that in a way that's going to be good for our well-being, I think that's going to really benefit us.
That's so good. As you were speaking then, I kind of I was thinking for myself, like my default is to kind of be feelings led, and sometimes I kind of get that really trips me up, and so I go down this rabbit hole of thinking, oh, someone said that, or this is how I'm feeling because of what that person said, and therefore that must be the truth. And in this time for me particularly is God's been really speaking to me about knowing truth, so that they can have precedent over my feelings, and it's a really hard balance when, especially if you're have a kind of habit of being feelings led. It's really hard to kind of shift that over, but and I think there's so much grace. We need to give ourselves as much grace as we can, and like you say, to not feel guilty, to not kind of put false expectations on ourselves as well. That's good. So could you maybe just share a bit about Kintsugi Hope? I love the idea of Kintsugi. I love that kind of Japanese art and what it means prophetically. So could you tell us just a little bit about that and what that's looking like at the moment, and maybe how people could access some support during this time?
Yeah, so Kintsugi is a Japanese word that means golden joinery. So I got this bowl here, and it broke the other day, and I tried to mend it with super glue here. Well, my daughter broke it actually, and the whole idea of super glue, though I haven't done a particularly good job on this bowl, is you try and hide the cracks. You try and pretend that it's okay. What they do in Japan is they put a gold powder in the glue, so instead of hiding the cracks, they make a feature of the cracks. So arguably the object becomes more beautiful than it was before. It certainly becomes more unique. There isn't a bowl like this now on planet Earth. And I think that's a bit like our lives. Like, beauty comes out of brokenness, and that our scars are not there to be ashamed of. Our scars make us who we are. And everyone's unique. Everyone's story is different. And so me and Diane, we started a charity called Kintsugi Hope a number of years ago now. And really to try and tackle two big issues: social isolation and mental health. And the way we did this is we wrote a 12-step program around well-being. I'm a little bit like Alcoholics Anonymous, but for well-being. I sort of describe it as Weight Watchers for well-being. It's not like therapy or counseling or something that can appear quite heavy. It's really like, come along, get a load of support with the people in the group, learn some strategies to dealing with anxiety and anger and self-acceptance and perfectionism. We wrote it in learning styles, so it looks different. You'll never find a Kintsugi group that looks the same as another Kintsugi group. And we've trained churches across the country to deliver this, and it's been incredible. We've trained over 186 people so far. And since the coronavirus kicked off, this has moved into Zoom groups. And at the start, I was like, I'm not really sure this is going to work, because Zoom is all right, but it's not the same. And but actually, it's been working pretty good. And for some people, they've said, you know what, I'd rather come on a Zoom call than walk into a church.
Yeah.
It's less intimidating. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's been good. And so now we're training all the churches up who want to do it online. There's an application process they need to go through to make sure safeguarding is in place, etc., etc. But yeah, and we're signing churches up most weeks. And we just launched yesterday the youth version of the Kintsugi course, which is 6 weeks, and so slightly different to the adult one. But so that's looking really good as well. So yeah, so I really think, ironically, our country is more connected than it's ever been.
Yeah.
You know, streets have started WhatsApp groups. We have WhatsApp groups. There's this brilliant thing called Free Up, Free Down. You look for your neighbours there, 3 of them and 3 of them. We start a WhatsApp group and make sure that each other are okay, which is fantastic. So it's really easy to say to someone, do you fancy joining a wellbeing group? And see how we get on. So yeah, so that's what we've been putting lots of effort into, which is brilliant.
Brilliant, thank you.
I love that. There's the sun. That's good. That keeps it real. That's what I say.
Yeah, I'd just love it if you could share, you know, a story just to encourage those watching this episode.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we've had so many emails in the last couple of weeks. It's been quite overwhelming, actually. I was involved in Spring Harvest at Home, and they had an incredible reaction. And I did this one talk on anxiety and tackling anxiety, which I guess people can watch online still to the end of April, I think it is. But I've had so many emails about that one talk, and most of them are just going, you know what, I thought I was going mad. But I realised I have anxiety, and that anxiety isn't weakness. That actually we need to learn to manage our anxiety, and we need to learn to manage how we do that. But it's not weakness. And I mean, absolute tearjerkers of emails. I mean, it's been incredible watching that. And I think the other big area has been people realising that their perfectionism, they're trying to get everything right, drives their anxiety. I think shame drives perfectionism, and it drives anxiety. And yeah, and so those stories, I mean, there's so many. I mean, literally, I still haven't responded to all the emails, which is really, really kind of people to email in.
That's amazing. So to finish, how can we be praying for you? How can we be praying for those who also are kind of struggling with particularly mental health at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think where we're at the moment is mental health is a real challenge for lots of people. I actually think it's going to be even more of a challenge when we come out of lockdown. And interestingly, talking to sort of mental health experts, which I am not one, and don't ever claim to be, but I've got some trustees who are, and they're saying, you know, initially when it's kicked off, actually some of the statistics went down. They had less referrals because people are quite resilient in a crisis. Also, I think there's a bit of that, you know, what's going on with A&E departments. If you've got anything but coronavirus, you don't go to hospital at the moment because you're worried. So there's a bit of that going on as well. But what everyone is saying to us is when lockdown is finished, there will be a tsunami of mental health issues. And, you know, there will be so many memorial services because we haven't been able to have funerals with more than 4 people. So we need to remember people that have died. We need to grieve, we need to lament. 40% of the Psalms are lament. So we really need to be there for people. That's why our message in Kintsugi is clear to the church: get trained. Get trained, get ready. Don't let us catch us unaware. Everyone's telling us we are going to need to understand emotional mental well-being like we've never understood it before, because that's what our country needs us to do. And so my prayer is that people would catch that. You know, we're a small charity. We don't have a big marketing budget or anything like that. It's all through relationship. It's all through connection. And so we just pray that people will gossip about us in a good way. Financially, it's tough because I think charities at the moment have an increase for their demand, but less resources coming in. So, you know, we're losing thousands a month because of no events. There's a new thing that's happened, which you got involved in yesterday, called the 2.6 challenge, where people do anything for 2.6 minutes or 26 minutes. So we're hoping that people get behind us and support us through that means. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And we'll have to see where we are in a couple of months. But I just feel like we need to be ready to help.
Patrick, thank you so much for your time today. I really
Pleasure.
appreciate it, and yeah, thank you for your heart and for everything that you do. And yeah, it's amazing, and thank you for blessing the church in
No
what you do.
worries. Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.